There are so many things that make or break a video or commercial project. The one thing that sells any video and makes it engaging is the camera movement itself. So what makes a camera movement cinematic? In this video, I'm going to answer that question by looking at a fast-paced real estate commercial that we shot that heavily relied on camera movement. We're going to be looking at some behind-the-scenes lighting diagrams and show you exactly how we shot this. So before we even start breaking anything down, I'd like to talk about this project a bit in terms of what was the original ask. We are basically looking at all the amenity spaces around this real estate property. It was known as the Ivy, and we wanted to highlight those amenities in terms of what the target audience of the building is to expect in terms of having fun with friends, cycling, easy access to the subway, all the cool hip restaurants around, as well as like coffees and stuff like that. So their target audience was basically new home buyers as well as students, and they just want to highlight that this is a young hip community and basically sell that through this fast-paced commercial. And the main thing that I want to start off in terms of camera movement is getting consistent camera movement across your edit. Yes, we had a planned shot list as well as where these would necessarily sit in the edit. And then when it came down to actually editing like the DC cut of this, we kind of changed things around to see what would actually work. And when it comes to a montage commercial, you can't really necessarily plan everything, because when you get to the edit and you start messing with things around, you're like, oh, this fits here, because we're kind of telling multiple stories as they go on. So how do we push that around? And then how do we flow through these stories fluidly? And you have to do this through camera movements, match cuts, and matching the movement if you're pushing in, if you're pulling out, dollying across something, or even with the specialty shots that you see throughout the piece. This is the big main scene that I want to talk about in terms of camera movement. And then we're going to basically look at each of these scenes and break it down in terms of how we lit it, and also just how you deal with spaces in terms of natural lighting and playing with that as well. So again, in this sequence here, we've already introduced each character, and then we've kind of done a two-shot of each character. And now we're going to go into another montage sequence of like the actions that we did. So in this scene here, this is actually a three-shot. So we go from a POV to him, we get a camera whip, then we get a POV of his feet, and then we get an outside necessarily like wide. I just noticed somebody's sitting in the background of that image. Well, that's great. And then this is going from left to right. Obviously, when we're driving a narrative forward, we want to be going from left to right because that's the natural way we read things as well. And then so left to right, and then we're going through elements in the foreground. And honestly, when we were planning this out and location scouting and everything like that, we knew that we wanted elements in the foreground and we're going to be moving across these scenes. We didn't know exactly how they would stitch together in post, but a thing that we wanted to get consistent is the distance between us and our talent, the speed of the camera, and then how we can transition that into another scene afterwards. Are we stopping? Are we slowing down? Or are we going to continue moving and everything like that? So we kind of shot each of these scenes consistently across the board so we'd have that flexibility in post. So the full shot plays out like me full on tracking him, and then I stop. And then this one plays out in terms of now we see the grocery, and it's just blended with simple keyframing and maskings in Premiere Pro. There's nothing really advanced here. And then we reveal our two talent that we introduced before that are going grocery shopping. So this is highlighting the grocery spaces in the amenities near the building as well. So then this is going across the frame, and then a nice easy transition point is that we have a shelf going into a bookshelf, and then we land on the exact perfect book that she was looking for. So again, this is one of those classic, like you see these in a lot of commercials in terms of montage stuff. And this is how we pull a viewer into this unrealistic world that we're creating, right? Is doing these cuts like that. We're like, whoa, I didn't expect that. And also adding sound of dying and everything like that. So we go kind of from like a uncontrolled environment where we're just dealing with the daylight, and then to a sub-control environment where we had a lot of strip lights that we had to deal with, and then into a full-on bookstore that we had control of all the lights and everything like that. So I tried to keep the lighting consistent so we weren't looking at anything too crazy, but this one was just time of day. We're shooting it during all those bike scenes, so the sun was up. This was around 1-2 o'clock, so high sun. You want to avoid shooting on this, but we were dealing with like a lot of shadows and a lot of interest and everything like that you can see on the floor. And then we were establishing a shadow side and a light side. Just shooting on the shadow side just allows that all that interest that we're looking for. So again, we got some highlights on his arms, his legs, the bike itself on the back side. And then if we look at the shadow that we're creating here from, you can see the sun position right there. And then the shadow side that we have established. And he's just going through so many things where the shadows and light play in so many directions and everything like that. But it was super important to get this foreground element so that we can actually transition. And then to shoot this properly, we were dealing with multiple focal lengths because there were multiple distances that we had to do this. In this case, I was maybe 20 feet from our talent, so I was maybe on a 50. And then in the next scene, I was shooting this on like a 35. But also when we were shooting this, we shot this on multiple focal lengths because we didn't know necessarily if we would have all these things in play in terms of having a consistency with the distance, right? So this is just something that you want to consider and get coverage. You don't want to just bank on shooting on one focal length. So when we shot this as well, we shot this on a 35 and then we had the ability to crop in post, but we just saw that it was too busy and didn't necessarily match what we were looking for. And then we swap into the 35 here. And then if we just look naturally, we kind of lucked out with this location in terms of having lights and strip lights there. So there was a bunch of rows of lights at the top of the ceiling, as you can imagine, like going across all this direction as well as this direction as well. And then we had a row of strip lights here. And then at the location, we asked the manager, like, hey, can we turn some of these off? And it was a situation of all or nothing, which is like a gaffer's worst nightmare. So what I had him do is diffuse this side by just putting little white pieces of paper up there. And then that diffused it and cut it down and just gave us a nice key light. And then they diffused the ones back here with those white sheets of paper as well. And then on these ones here, they blacked them completely out. So if I had a row here, it would be blacked completely out, as well as turned away to get some light back onto here, but away from our talent. And then if you just look at in terms of those highlights and shadows here, you can see that on our talent as well. And then if we look at the shadow side here, we have that nice contrast even in the face. And this shelf of this dark wood is just providing that natural neg, and even on here. So we're mainly getting the sandwich of light and the main key from up here, and then it's coming down, and then they're getting kind of sandwiched by the negative fill. So this is just something that you have to be quick on your feet in terms of looking at a location, and a location scout would help this a lot more in terms of deciding, oh, how we're exactly going to light this, because we didn't have time to rig up tubes on the top. I think 2 to 4 hours in this grocery store. I don't exactly remember. And we had to get so many shots, including a probe shot here. So there were just so many things that we had to consider, and just quick shots that necessarily look good in terms of composition and framing and not necessarily focus on the lighting. It's a grocery store. It's not going to be like super cinematic in terms of having like super contrasty or something like that. So again, we wanted to make it feel lit. It's a commercial, bright and airy. If you guys are enjoying this content and are looking for more long form breakdowns in terms of how to become a cinematographer, as well as just lighting things and just enjoy breakdowns like this, we actually have a course that we're going to be releasing next year. If you're interested in this course or any other digital products that we will be releasing, sign up for the mailing list and you'll be the first to know before any of these videos go live. Anyway, back to the breakdown. And then we go into the next scene where we are on the bookshelf, and then we had a lot more control in this area. So this is shooting a frame within a frame, and we're kind of doing that here as well. This is why this lines up so nicely going into our next shot, because it's kind of a matching shot in terms of we're focusing right on the center while tracking their movement. And then again, that frame and frame that we're looking for. So here we're kind of we had to do a top light source. So in this entire row of bookcases, we have Astaire Titan tubes, and these are set. Oh, that is a bad Titan tube. Set all to 2700 Kelvin, and they're all shooting downwards like this. And then we had crates on these as well, so I'll just draw a little thing like that. And what these crates did is avoid all the spill going on everywhere and just lit down into the center. And then you can see that kind of with the harsh highlights that we have on the top of her head. And this is very top lit, as you can see. I would love to add a little light back into here, but if we were going into the next scene, in terms of consistency, the shadow is right there, and then we're kind of more necessarily on a light side here, but we'll get into that after. So if we go back into here, you can see that here, and then this little catch light is from there's a big window in the front of the shop, and then this is spilling daylight all over onto this side of her face. This wasn't necessarily a light, but it was establishing more of a light side and a dark side on her face. Obviously, this is basically top lit, as you can see, but we have more shadow on this side of her face. And then in terms of, if you look at the front of the books and everything like that, you can see that the same color temperature is there as well. And this is what we use, is just having house lights above us that match the tone here. It depends on what you want to create in terms of like having it super silhouetted or just focusing on that. But we wanted to highlight that, hey, we're in a bookstore. This is supposed to be natural, also looking commercial and otherworldly. So we have the lights on in the front just to establish that as well. So going into the next shot, we kind of wanted to keep it consistent. So let me erase all this stuff and then switch back. And we wanted to keep that consistent. So again, we had those Titan tubes up in the row. We had one here in the back that we had to get rid of, but there is one right above her here. And then this is shooting down. And then you can see that there is a skirt on this because this sign is getting lit up. This side of her head is getting lit up as well. But there is no spill happening on these books, as in like this is all necessarily not lit and getting a lot of light. If I had that tube up there just without any skirt or anything like that, the light would spill everywhere and we wouldn't necessarily get any shape or anything like that. So a thing could do in terms of, establishing a light and shadow side, you can either, keep it consistent in terms of what you saw before, or you can play up the fact in terms of relighting every scene. What you could have done is had another Titan tube. I'm just going to draw this in blue to make it theoretical, and light that side of her face and develop that shadow there and just swap it over. This is just very subjective. Again, really depends on what you're looking for and what you want. If we go back to the golden rules in terms of shooting on shadow side, this is not necessarily a thing that you have to abide from. This is just something that I like to practice. But again, now we're here on light side, but we're dealing with a top lid source. But in some of my work, you can see that I kind of venture on the light side in terms of shooting on it. I'm not shooting on something that completely is flat. If I look here, I have a gradient going across her face. Obviously, this is the lighter side, but I do have some dark parts here, a little bit here, and then on the front side of her shoulders and arms there. And then if we look on the light side, we have some here. So I do get some natural kind of checkerboard and dark and white that we're looking for. Again, this would look a lot better if it was on the other side, but I was playing more here with consistency rather than looking for a perfect cinematic looking image. Now, we just talked about executing a bunch of camera movements in terms of adding fluidity to your edit, but necessarily how do you plan for that? What parameters or things can you look for when planning something like that? If something like that interests you, I have a video queued up here that you'll probably enjoy. If you have any questions, please let us know in the comments below. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video.